Welcome to Impossible Bodies.
Hello everybody. Welcome at the start of the last weekend of Impossible Bodies. And when I say last, I mean that we're talking about the last events. So today, tomorrow and on Sunday, we have our last events. But the Impossible Bodies experience will stay online. So please have a visit and watch the beautiful artworks we're presenting there. We will start tonight with a very special, creative and thought-provoking work, imagining future societies where virus is currency. And if you think it's science fiction, I think you will have another look at that when you see the film. So we're going to watch Money in Vivo by Noam Youngrak Son, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions during the film, you can ask them in our Vimeo stream. If you're watching this in a theater, please push the button Q&A, and Noam will be here in about 35 minutes to answer your questions. So enjoy.
Welcome to Money in Vivo, a talk show not only about making money, but understanding money. The issue that we're going to talk about today is economic inequality. We invited 4 guests from various countries to talk about how economic inequality appears differently and how we should deal with it. So let's give a round of applause for Morgan, Chris, Riley, and Alex. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience, starting from Morgan?
Hi, my name is Morgan. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm 25 years old. I don't have a particular job, but I mainly earn by using a smartphone app called Cheerope. Today I want to share how individuals rely on a digital platform in an economically unequal world.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm 20 years old. I live in a huge herd consisting of 100,000 tiny bats. We recently migrated to a country called Polydosia from the country next to it called Ethiopia. A lot of our members were dead from the shooting in Ethiopia when we were migrating. Today, I want to talk about the economic inequality between countries and how it fuels nationalism.
Hi, I'm Riley. I'm the representative of a political party called the Low Immunist Union, the LIU in short. I'll share how we achieved equality through centralized healthcare.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a stay-at-home spouse and freelancer writer. Today I want to introduce the policy of universal bat companionship through which I earn my monthly income.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to hear more about y'all. First of all, I would like to ask a question to Morgan about the app that you just mentioned. What is it, and how do you earn from it?
It's called Cheerope. Basically, it's an app that links you with someone else to exchange viruses. It's the biggest market for viruses and intimacy in this country.
And you refer to it as a way that you are personally dealing with economic inequality.
To be precise, this is the way of living that I've inevitably chosen in the world that is economically unequal, because this is one of the only few ways for a working class person to accumulate wealth.
Can you show us how the app works?
Of course. So this is the app. And these are the notifications that you receive when somebody likes you. It says somebody sent you a bat. It's from a person called John, 28 years old, 30 kilometers away. Virus similarity 98%.
What is virus similarity? Is it good that it is 98%?
Not at all. It means that most of his virus are what I already have. It doesn't make any sense if I earn what I already have from the exchange.
Oh, now I understand. Because what counts as money is diversity, not the quantity of viruses. So you're probably not going to accept him, right?
Definitely. I'll wash this person away, and then If you see this person called Naomi, 23 years old, 15 kilometers away, her virus similarity with me is 40%, which means it's very likely for me to earn what I don't have if I exchange viruses with her. I'll send her a bat.
Okay, so what happens when she accepts you?
Then she will send a bat emoji back to me and a match will be made. We'll be able to chat and plan to meet to eventually exchange viruses.
Let us know during the show if you get a reply. In the meantime, let's continue talking about the topic of today. Do you think syrup can be considered as a solution to economic inequality?
I'm pessimistic. Nevertheless, it's a corporation across the sea that owns Chirop, and they work primarily to profit themselves, not for the whole society. But I do think it's possible for an individual to overcome economic inequality using Chirop like what I'm doing.
And what is their business model?
In order to use Chirop, you have to subscribe to it. Then they'll send you an insulated envelope every month. The envelope has a small container inside, which I have to fill up with viruses and send back as a monthly registration fee.
How much is it?
It depends on how much you earn from it. It's usually from 30% to 37% of your earning.
Wow, that's high. Can you form a union?
No, because it's not a legitimate form of employment.
Does Chirop reveal how the registration fee is used?
There has been a public demand for that for a while, and now they put that information online, but it's still a bit blunt.
So, to sum up, if I understand correctly, Chirop could be a source of income for the individual workers like you, but it eventually profits a private corporation whose interest is not about resolving inequality.
Yes.
We will get back to more details about the app, but before that, I have more questions for our guests. Now I would like to ask Chris. Chris, what happened to your herd and how come did you migrate?
We are a big herd, and we habitually migrate once every few hundred years. And back then, we migrated from a country called Chiropia to another country called Polydocia.
Can you explain about those countries for the people who are not familiar? Also, you talked earlier about international economic inequality.
There's a strict economic hierarchy between two countries. The economy of Polydocia is dependent on that of Chiropia, and Chiropia exploits Polydocia as a cheap source of labor.
Where did that inequality originate?
Since pre-virus economic times, Chiropia formed a centralized capital city way earlier than the countries around them. Their capital city was more massive than any other city in history, and it flourished with vast markets full of foreign goods. Polydocia, on the other hand, had a deserted territory that didn't allow them to build a city. In this environmental constraint, they had developed a unique social structure that consists of communes that are highly autonomous and self-sufficient.
Oh, I can imagine those conditions would have been bipolarized even wider since they started using viruses as currency.
Exactly. After the global adaptation of virus economy, Chiropia had exponential economic growth due to their ability of effective reproduction of money in the condensed capital city, and the socio-economic gap between the two countries became extreme.
So you left the more affluent country. Why was that?
The economic growth and the expansion of the city accompanied the increased contact between humans and our herd. And as you know, a bat is a great reservoir of capital. so that some people were abusively touching us with their virus glands.
I have to say that is indeed horrible, and that must have been a difficult decision for your herd to make if hundreds of thousands of bats were to move all at once.
Yes, it was a big deal, and it requires a lot of preparation for the entire herd to move. When the explorer bats find the right place to move, they fly back and forth from their destination to figure out the optimal path for the herd. Meanwhile, the rest of the bats have to fasten themselves to store energy for the long flight. And from that, European zoologists could notice that we are likely to move to Polydosia.
And how did the humans react? Was that why the shooting happened, as you mentioned earlier?
They were extremely concerned about losing their wealth, and an enormous amount of money stored in hundreds of thousands bats could be transferred all at once to Polydosia if we migrate. Thus, they devised diverse measures to prevent this from happening, but all of those didn't work, and as a frantic last-ditch effort, the European army shot at our herd in the air.
I can't believe how cruel they were. I'm so sorry to hear that. Can I ask what else Europeans did to prevent your herd from flying away?
Some tried to provide more appealing habitats for us so that we change our mind to stay. And some tried to remove our source of food so that we won't be able to gain enough fat for a long-distance flight. Some even insisted on manipulating our immune system by spraying hormones in our habitat to reduce the amount of money in our body, thus to reduce the amount of capital that Polydosia will gain. And what they chose to do eventually was to build a gigantic wall between Polydosia and Tropia.
Wow, the last idea sounds especially absurd. Obviously bats can fly over it.
Everyone knew that this doesn't make any sense because we can obviously fly over the wall. But nobody cast doubt on that because there wasn't any other option. And finally, when we began to move, we just flew over the wall.
What could be a reason for that madness?
Tropia has been profiting from the unequal dynamics with Polydosia, and I think they were terrified of losing that privilege.
And what was the aftermath of the shooting?
A lot of bats were shot. I still remember how they screamed and fell. But since our herd was so huge, even the shooting could not resist us from moving. Now we are completely gone from Tropia.
Thank you so much for sharing that tragic history with us. Now I would like to ask Riley about their political party. Riley, can you introduce the Low Immunist Union to our audience?
The Low Immunist Union was formed after the Low Immunist Revolution. Since then, we've been ruling the country for over 15 years. The LIU stands against the private ownership and market-driven exchange of viruses, and we stand against the high immunists and their extravagant virus glands that reproduce wealth by exploiting the health of low immunists.
That sounds like a clear manifestation of your political stance. Can I put it like the core value of your party is economic equality?
Yes, we believe that the exploitative relationship between the high immunist and low immunist can be dismantled by accomplishing economic equality.
I'm curious how that operates in real life. You talked about the centralized healthcare system in the beginning. Could you elaborate on that?
That's a good question. First of all, by law, we strictly limit the amount of virus that can reside in one's body, and therefore, as a state, we provide a healthcare service that includes regular inspection, disinfection, vaccination, and if necessary, the use of antiviral medication.
And are those services completely free of cost?
Yes, the state is responsible for providing the service. We believe the people have the inviolable right and obligation to have the equal access to the medical service, regardless of their immune capacity, age, gender, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity.
It's interesting that you referred the access to medical service as both right and obligation. Can you explain about the obligatory side of it?
Caring for one's health is a duty and a matter of honor for every citizen in accordance with the principle, one who does not respect one's body, neither shall one be respected. We provide the medical infrastructure and services, and the people are obliged to comply with the medical service rules.
What do you mean by the medical infrastructure?
As a government, we design, manufacture, distribute medical products, services, and facilities. The right to stay healthy, to be educated, to rest and leisure, to live in a safe environment, to be politically engaged is ensured by the public hospitals.
If I understand correctly, that means a public hospital is an administrative center of your country.
Yes, exactly.
And I wonder how that restricts the private ownership of the virus.
The state develops and uses biotechnology exclusively to prevent the private reproduction of wealth. Storing of capital is centralized in one big cell that is taken care of by the state. The state is responsible for the stable conservation of the cell.
Oh, so it's like a national bank.
Yes, and its function is not only to store money, but also to redistribute the immunity. The virus taken from the people, mainly through public hospitals, is fed into the cell, and the cell produces antibodies against those viruses. The state extracts the antibodies from the cell and distributes those equally to the people.
So that's how we share both virus and the immunity against it as a public asset. I assume that it must require very strict control.
Yes, we find it necessary. For instance, physical distancing and lockdown are enforced to prevent the personal exchanges of viruses. We also regulate the design of buildings and vehicles to be able to provide enough space for keeping distances of at least 1.5 meters. Furthermore, a portrayal of physical intimacy is prohibited. Platonic, long-distance relationship and in vitro fertilization are recommended. Personal hygiene, especially washing hands, is a significant part of primary education. The state has a responsibility to oversee and control to ensure these rules not to be violated.
How do you surveil if these regulations are obeyed?
There are many ways. For instance, people are obliged to wear face masks with an automatic lock and GPS in their daily lives, especially when they're in a public space. It is strictly prohibited to disassemble or hack this device.
But you aren't wearing one.
Good point. I'm not wearing it very exceptionally because I'm having a talk with you as a representative of the country, but I also have to wear it normally. It's actually very handy because it also tracks your heart rate, blood pressure, hormonal status to keep you healthy, and for sure it prevents the transmission of money.
That's very interesting. I realized that it contradicts so much with what Morgan talked about their economic system and the way they see intimacy. And I have more questions about it, but I'll keep it for later. I haven't asked Alice anything yet. Alex, during your introduction, you mentioned the policy of universal bat companionship. Could you explain what that is?
Yes, maybe I should start with why we needed this policy. Technically, our economic system isn't very different from that of Morgan. It's based on a market of viruses. But the blind spot of it is that not everyone has a suitable immune system for active participation in the market. Some people are just not capable of tolerating a big amount of money in their body.
That's exactly what we've been talking about today. So, that means your society is also not free from economic inequality.
It was a serious problem that a considerable number of the population were excluded from the economic system. Those people were not economically represented and appreciated enough, even though they significantly contributed to society in various forms of immaterial labor. For instance, by domestic labor, care work, and creative labor.
Probably that's why they had the low immunist revolution in Riley's country, because the market itself never guarantees equality.
Yes, so in response to this issue, the Ministry of Health and Finance devised this program to ensure the social and economic rights of citizens regardless of their ability to earn. It operates by linking each citizen with a companion bat to share living space.
A companion bat. Is it the one that is flying around you?
Yes, this is my companion bat. A companion bat stays at home during the day and flies out every night to eat and mate. A companion human that provides shelter and care for the bat can earn money that the bat brings home from his nightly flight on a regular basis. This becomes a considerable amount of money because bats have an amazing ability of gathering and storing viruses. This income allows people to live their lives in dignity without exploiting their health.
That sounds like an ingenious way of combating economic inequality, but I'm also very curious about the opinion of Chris if it's also a good idea for bats.
Yes, I also wanted to question if the policy merely instrumentalizes bats for human welfare.
Fair point, and that's why we call it not livestock but a companion.
But isn't it just rhetoric?
We have some policies that support it. For example, abusing one's companion bat is punishable by a maximum penalty of at least 5 years of imprisonment. People have to provide them a reliable living space in their domestic area to receive a basic income. They cannot exploit their companion bats to earn more than they can manage.
But apart from how safe the environment is the relationship ever consensual?
The Ministry of Health and Finance recruits the bats that are usually abandoned from their herds. They are provided with a short period with humans to decide if they want to live with human companions. Companionship starts only if a bat's satisfaction level during this period is noticeably high.
It's really great that we offer that to bats. Yes, some herds abandon young bats due to overpopulation. It has been a serious issue in the society of bats. I'm so happy to realize that they found a space and a relationship to rely on. But at the same time, I'm deeply sorry that they were once abandoned from where they were born.
So Alex, if you don't mind, can you explain to us what your relationship with your companion bat is like? Are you happy about it?
Yes, the program is designed to be lifelong. The Ministry of Health and Finance assigns everyone with a companion bat when people were born and registered. So my companion bat is one of the beings that I've been living with for the longest time. We're very close, both physically and emotionally.
It's very impressive that the relationship is supposed to be lifelong. Does it really last till everyone's last moment though?
That's an ideal scenario. It's a good coincidence that the lifespan of a bat is almost as long as that of humans. But of course, life is full of uncertainties, and sometimes either a bat or a human dies earlier than their companion. In case a bat dies earlier than a human, they will be assigned with another companion bat after a simple administrative process because it's a universal right for one to have a companion bat.
And what if a human dies earlier than their companion bat?
In that case, they will be taken care of by the Ministry of Health and Finance. They will do a job of managing public funds because their ability to gather and store money will still be very valid.
I'm amazed to learn how intricate the system is designed. Also, I find it especially interesting in comparison with the system that the Low Immunist Union has constructed. Both systems are dealing with the issue of economic inequality, but in somewhat different ways. Riley, I'm curious how you find the system that Alex just described.
That's totally different from the way we treat bats. As many of you have mentioned earlier, bats naturally hold an immense amount of capital within them, and as a state, we've been trying our best to control it. One thing we've been doing is to propagate the idea that the bats are evil, vicious, harmful, and dangerous animals, so that people avoid contact with the bat.
Sorry to interrupt, but I feel offended.
I understand that it would not be pleasant to be demonized, but we had to protect our people from money. Bats have been traditionally associated with wealth and higher economic class status, which we ideologically disagree. What we problematize are not the bat themselves, but the way that their images have been consumed by the people. We never harm bats physically, but we just want to isolate our people from bats. Therefore, worshipping a bat is prohibited. Distribution of the text, images, and videos of bats without permission is prohibited, especially when it is intended to further the aims of former unregulated market exchange of viruses.
But besides the different attitudes toward bats, I do see a lot of similarities too.
Yes, the policy of universal bat companionship that Alex talked about is definitely different from the way that we redistribute wealth, but I do believe that both systems attempted to tackle the same problem of economic inequality. As long as we share that, I think we can have a constructive conversation. What we find as a problem is especially when a system seizes their responsibility to deal with inequality and to protect their people's health and encourages the exchange of virus like the app that Morgan mentioned earlier.
Morgan, how do you find that statement?
I admit that there's a lot of insecurity for the individuals who use Chirrup. A friend of mine died last year very abruptly from getting infected by an uncontrollable amount of money. The system enables people to earn, but also put them at a certain risk.
That sounds very serious.
But I am very aware of the danger and accept it. This is the only easy way for me to accumulate wealth since I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I'm not doing anything immoral.
Well, it's not about your moral value. Regardless of if you accept it, by being involved in the market, you are contributing to the spread of the virus and putting everyone's life, including that of yours, at risk.
I don't think so. Of course it's tragic that people die from the virus, but we can't freeze the economy. Though Chirrup is a system with a lot of flaws, I don't think it's realistic enough to get rid of the market economy, and thus, a certain level of inequality is inevitable.
Well, I didn't say that discarding the market economy is the only way. The universal bat companionship also partly relies on the market, but it doesn't mean that the society is not responsible for inequality. I disagree if you have to sacrifice the lives of your people for economic growth.
I I see it as your lack of imagination to speculate beyond the market economy. There's so much possibility once you overcome it.
I hear some contrasting opinions about different ways of dealing with economic inequality. To cool down the discussion, I would like to ask a question for all of you. I'm very curious about how the system influences your personal health and well being.
I think what counts the most about my well being is how autonomous I am. In that sense, I am very satisfied. I believe that I'll be able to overcome economic inequality from my own metabolism. I believe my immune system to be strong enough. What I fear the most is not the death from the infection, but living a hopeless life without personal growth.
In terms of health, I can never be better than this. Not because I'm the leader of the ruling party, but because our healthcare system enforces everyone to stay healthy. I have to give up a certain kind of freedom in return, but it's still more desirable than getting infected by money and suffering from it.
I've been with my companion bat since I was born, whereas my mom hadn't had one until she became an adult. She had poor immunity, and I inherited it from her. As a kid, she couldn't dream further than becoming a housewife or getting severely ill, because her immune capacity wasn't adequate to be economically active. However, when I was growing up, knowing that my living will be assured by the universal pet companionship, I knew that I'll be able to become almost everything I wanted, without sacrificing my health. I'm very happy that my mom recently started an online master's degree because she also earns from her companion bat.
Do you see any room for improvement for your economic system? How would you make it better?
I'm very satisfied with the amount of virus that I earn from my companion bat, but I know that it's not sufficient for everyone. For example, for those with chronic conditions who are in need of extensive long-term medical services, universal bat companionship cannot be an excuse for getting rid of the other forms of social welfare services and standings. These are some points that our system can learn from the healthcare system that Riley's party has built, I think.
We're always open to sharing resources and know-hows. Just like the spreading of viruses, economic inequality is a global phenomenon, and therefore we feel responsible for sharing our experience. And to answer Noam's question, I think what can be improved from our system is the stability of the service. We want to guarantee our people that the system is sustainable enough to rely on. Therefore, the party needs to secure its political power.
Concerning the excuse of Riley, I think nothing can justify dictatorship. And what I want for my economic system is, I wish there were more platforms like Chirop. Like I mentioned before, there's no way for the users of Chirop to have voices against Chirop. But if there are more corporations that provide similar services to be chosen as alternatives, I believe the relationship between the platform and the users can be more equal. I believe our problems can be solved within the market economy.
Lastly, how do you envisage the future of your economic system?
By being in a companion relationship with a bat, I learn a lot about how to live with non-human species, especially in this time in which viruses work as currencies. Any creature owning a virus can act as an economic subject, and thus we need to rethink the relationship between not only bats, but also every species.
I certainly agree. While listening to your story, I also thought non-humans, especially animals, can become an important stakeholder in the free market. I will try to dilate the way that the idea of market in business has been defined.
We finally have a shared opinion. I also learned from the stories of Alex and Chris that economic inequality is perhaps not only interpersonal or international issue, but even an interspecies issue. I deeply regret expelling bats from our society. After this talk, I will work on revising our healthcare service to include non-humans, especially bats. As long as they can be infected by money, we feel a great responsibility to take care of them.
I find it very meaningful that this long conversation constructively concludes as an initiation of a new conversation. Noah, can you invite us again next time to collectively speculate about non-anthropocentric economic systems?
Yeah, I would love to provide you a stage for that. So I'll see all of you again next week and discuss how our economic systems can be inclusive for non-humans.
Money and Vivo, money and Vivo.
So, hello, Noam.
Hey,
Hi. Good
do
to have
you,
you here.
yeah, do you see me or do you hear me well?
I see you
Okay, is the audio good enough?
and I hear you.
Okay.
Yes, it is. So, Noam, welcome. We just watched your film Money in Vivo. You just told me that you haven't seen it for a while. How was it to see it
Um,
back?
I mean, there are like so many details that I forgot about like these speculative scenarios. Like, of course I still remember all the, the big premises of these economic systems, but like in the mostly in the very detailed way of how each economic system operates. I forgot, to be honest, I forgot a lot about it. So it's so nice to rediscover what I've been thinking of like months ago. And also it's surprising that like some of it might not be considered speculative anymore because it's more or less happening in the real world in the you know in a few months that I was just detached from this topic a little bit. But yeah, I would love to move on to the questions. Like
Yeah,
I
well,
think
actually, one of the questions is I have here is there are of course rather speculative models of economies. Could such a system, bats and humans, become reality? And you
yeah
just said maybe what happened in the last few months, it can become reality. So you have other
yeah.
thoughts about
So
it?
it's um, I think a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of things that that I described earlier is already happening, and I cannot really tell like how in which precise detail it'll function in real life because I'm not a virologist or a zoologist. But I think the devil always lies in the details. So I sincerely hope this not to happen in a way that we are in the way that is like the way that we are treating non-humans now, like not like industrial bat farming or like having battery cages for bats. And like what another thing that I want to mention is that like for instance, in Germany, they once considered the idea of immune certificate, which is to give more freedom to travel or move or to be active active physically for the people who are more immune to COVID-19. And that's funny. What I find funny about this is that currency is also a form of certificate. It's an economic certificate that indicates a certain amount of economic value. So in a way, like if they made certificates about the immunity, I don't know. I think that phenomenon is not too far from what I speculated in this film. So in a way, this crazy paced world exceeds the speed of my speculation, which I find really interesting.
So what year is it actually set in? Did you had a year in mind when you created this work?
I use the term future only for the ease of the understanding of the viewers, but I'm not very a huge fan of that word because it's often associated with the idea of, progress and growth that we experienced enough in the modern time, I think. And I became deliberately ambiguous about the exact time frame of it because of that. So I just want it to be perceived as, another possibility of parallel present, like the way that they had, they're considering immune certificate in Germany, like they are like considering virus as an economic form of, a form of economic certificate. So it can be more, I would be more happy if it's perceived as more parallel present, not necessarily the future.
Okay. So I have another question for you.
Okay.
I think it's the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Did you consider a society more like capitalism, where people would abuse or factory farm beds for the currency potential?
I think so because, you know, um, like as I mentioned earlier, like my speculation are always inspired by what's happening now. So it's also like, I mean, the some instance, like, some instances of animal exploitation in my film is in a way a representation of the way that we're living here. Like, the way Donna Haraway uses the word capitalism already pretty much defines the way our species interact with non-humans or with the entire planet. So, and I think we can make some, individual struggle against this tendency, but without overcoming capitalism, without, raising critical questions about capitalism, I think it's, impossible to overcome this, you know, dichotomy that is already set.
Okay, thanks so much, Noam.
Yeah, what's the answer? Like, enough?
Definitely. Yes.
Okay.
So we'll say goodbye
Yeah.
for now,
Thank you for
and
having me.
have a great night.
And also for the visitors, like, thank you all for, you know, putting your precious evening time for this film.
Yeah, I'm going to ask some more precious evening time from them, because we continue with our program at 8 o'clock with More Mother and Hypostician Duo, part of our music program Future Shock. So I hope you grab something to eat maybe, and we'll see you back at 8. Thanks again, Noam.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.